Howdy. I've been wanting to do a piece on Dinesh D'Souza for quite a while, and today I got a really perfect spur. I follow him on Twitter, and I've been following him for quite a few years because he's representative of a kind of pseudo-intellectual, semi-scholarly, patrician-sounding, and sanctimonious Kulturkampf supporter of right-wing causes, loves the Trump administration, hates Hillary Clinton and liberals. Oh, I twitches on Obama and Clinton all the time. I follow him on Twitter. Anyway, that's today how I found him weighing in on the climate change issue, which of course is an empirical science topic. And he's announcing that this climate change stuff is a hoax. It's global warming is just silly. And he goes after Al Gore as usual. And I don't care what Al Gore thinks about the subject. I'm much more interested in what the science is. And unfortunately, Dinesh D'Souza isn't interested in what the science is. He happened to link to a piece from 2015 from Forbes magazine by a guy named Taylor. And it was about how the ice fields hadn't actually declined and that this was proving global warming was wrong. What Dinesh didn't think to do was to find out whether or not the source he's linking to from 2017, in 2017, to a 2015 source was right, whether it was accurate even in 2015. Because it turns out not only had Taylor relied upon a climate source that immediately repudiated him, pointing out that Taylor had misunderstood the data, but even a manufacturing journal online had decided to fact check it and discovered that Taylor claiming that the data was such and so. They contacted NASA, and NASA said, nope, that's not true. That global ice has in fact declined 5%. Since the time range involved, and Taylor has his head up his ass. He doesn't actually know what he's talking about. All of this was easily accessible information. A whole slew of climate scientists weighed in on this subject, and I'll put links up to all that stuff so you can follow the paper trail yourself. Clearly, Dinesh never thought to fact check any of it, and I'm going, yawn. Dinesh never fact checks anything. He arrives at, as Tortucans tend to, things that he wants to be true, and then he only pays attention to information that reinforces it. That's how he does all of his thinking. And the reason why he was on my scope, particularly, had to do with a 2007 book he did, What Was So Great About Christianity, where along the way of extolling the great virtues of Christianity and its historical contributions, asserted that the Spanish Inquisition really wasn't as bad as everybody had said. Jaw drop. Oh, really? And it turns out Dinesh had relied on one and only one source, this wonderful book by Kamen, which is called A Revisionist History of the Spanish Inquisition. And it's really a great book. I'd recommend Dinesh D'Souza read it sometime because he clearly didn't understand the content of it. Dinesh had claimed that, one, the Spanish Inquisition hadn't really killed as many people as everybody had thought, and two, that it didn't really target Jews, so it really wasn't so bad. Okay? Well, the first point was a semi-misleading truth. Yeah, when people had done estimations of death toll during the Inquisition, as they had done for witchcraft trials and heresy trials, people tended to overestimate stuff, particularly in the 20th century. And Kamen had gone through methodically looking at the actual death records and found out that it was way less. It was quite a few thousand people, but still way less than what everybody had thought. That's the kernel of truth to it. But it wasn't because the Inquisition were a bunch of scrupulous sweet cookies who didn't want to harm more people. They would often send out blanket indictments for thousands of Jews, way more, as many as actually got killed in the final Inquisition. But the Jews packed up and left. They would go across the border into Portugal, for example. And this information was in Kamen's book. He went into all of this stuff in great detail. And on the targeting of Jew front, Dinesh was doing a piece of very tactical dissembling here because the primary targets of the Inquisition in Spain were what were called conversos. These were ex-Jews who either had converted to Christianity or were descended from conversos. And the conniption fit Spaniards were really paranoid about racial purity. Remember, they had this incredibly complicated pecking order where if you were a pure-born Spaniard born in Mexico, you were less socially than a pure-born Spaniard born in Spain. They had very complicated social hierarchy and not pretty, very, very racially based. And they were feared that a lot of these conversos, who were becoming fairly prominent in the administration in Madrid of the new unified monarchy under Ferdinand and Isabella, were getting too high hat. They were getting uppity. They were starting thinking they were equal to us real Christians. And suddenly you found the Inquisition targeting conversos, thinking they were really secretly not eating pork on the sly, that they were performing secret rituals, sacrificing babies. I'm not making any of this stuff up. This was the paranoia that was circulating around in the Spanish Inquisition. Does this sound creepy to you? It should, and you find out a lot about this by reading the Kamen book that Dinesh D'Souza should try reading sometime. One of the things that really struck me about how creepy the Spanish Inquisition was had to do with the fact that not only was it racially based, they were targeting converso ex-Jews. There were so few Jews knocking around any time that they didn't really have to worry about that. And the only time they didn't target conversos is when they ran out of conversos. So they would go after Protestant Huguenots up in the north of Spain. And it was a very rare circumstance because they had a lot of conversos to go after. Is that in order to be convicted and sentenced to death, you had to be burned at the stake, specifically. And there was one example of a Jewish converso who was accused of being a heretic, and so was his mom. Unfortunately, the mother had inconsiderately died already, and they convicted her retroactively of heresy and dug up her bones so that they could burn her corpse so that they could fulfill the proper rule of how you're supposed to burn a heretic. Okay, let's follow the rules here. Technically speaking, the Catholic Church never killed anybody in the Inquisition because they signed a little paper that deeded the person over to the state. And even though the processions to the burning stakes were done with priests and bishops and all sorts of religious paraphernalia knocking around, technically it was the church not doing it. It was the state because they'd signed the little paper, remember? But in fact, it was a religiously mandated superstructure. And you can legitimately argue that no institution should ever have been granted the power to do what the Inquisition did, or the state in complicity with them. And that didn't change with Kamen's book. It's creepy and vile and immoral as all get out. And little tunnel vision Dinesh D'Souza, who can't figure out how climate change is real because he never bothers to check a primary source, who can't even read the Spanish Inquisition book that he cited as his one and only source on this subject clearly. This guy thinks Donald Trump is a really wonderful guy. Why shouldn't he? Donald Trump thinks exactly the same way. He too is addicted to secondary sources, Breitbart, and stupid crap he sees on the internet. Never fact checks a damn thing. You can't pin him down on sources, except these people are making laws for us. A creationist in Montana who has cozied up, Gianforte, just won the seat there after having an altercation with a reporter who had the temerity to ask him a question on the new Health Act. And the CBO reports. That guy is a young earth creationist, supported the Glencoe Creationism Museum with a huge amount of money, and also cozies up to Doug Wilson, who's that slavery-supporting wackaloon preacher that Dinesh D'Souza debated many, many years ago and didn't notice that little detail either. That Kulturkampf worldview, they're going to be making laws for you. That guy is helping to vote for things in Congress as soon as he takes his seat. And Dinesh D'Souza is never going to notice any of that. He's never going to think about things he doesn't think about because he's a Tortucan. And that's why Tortucans should never be in positions of power. You get inquisitions, you get pogroms, you get the Stasi police state in the old East Germany, you get Pol Pot, you get any circumstance when irrational, non-evidence-based, dogma-driven, Tortucan-dominated worldviews have the power of government to coerce you. That's how you get Auschwitz. That's how you get Russian gulags. That's how you get inquisitions. And the people who enable that to happen, a lot of them are exactly like Dinesh D'Souza, who cannot tell a primary from a secondary source, fact checks nothing, and derives everything from ideological certitude, devoid of solid evidence. Well, there's my little soapbox today. I've been wanting to say something about Dinesh D'Souza. We know there's a lot to say about Dinesh D'Souza and the worldview he represents. And that's today from the soapbox. Thank you very much.